Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be discussing the role of data in advancing the achievement of decent work and economic growth, with an aim to share experiences and examples from the panel on how data can provide information and insights that can inform policies to determine effective pathways for action on national and international issues relating to the SDGs. Now, before we begin, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists. Joining me on stage are Niels Ploe, Director of the Statistics Denmark and Chair of the UN Working Group on Big Data. Thank you for joining us. Your Excellency, Yunus Nasser, CEO at the Dubai Data Establishment and Assistant Director at the Director General at Smart Dubai. Kai Klandorf, Executive Director at the Network of Estonian Nonprofit Institutions. And last but not least, Malik Radwan Al-Madani, Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Strategy and Future Development at the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Authority. Now, to begin, I would like to invite Your Excellency to tell us a little bit about how the UAE can harness data-driven policymaking towards sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Lara. And I would like to start by first thanking MBRSG School of Government for this great opportunity into discussing data challenges that we are living at this moment. Before I begin, I would think that you all agree that we are living at an age where data is very fragile and fragmented. And it comes with a lot of opportunities, but on the other hand, there are a lot of challenges with it. So in order to harness the best value out of that data, you need to have a very holistic approach. This is why at Smart Dubai, we have believed in 2014, in order to transform the city to become the smartest city globally, we needed to address the data at the heart of a smart city. And for that, this is why we've started the most comprehensive data initiative globally. And when I say comprehensive, I mean it, because it's not only about big data, it's about data in general, from being it in public and private sector, or even more importantly, within our citizens. So this is why Dubai Data have focused into putting the legislative frameworks that enables the exchange of data among the city to provide a trusted exchange between the public to private and also with the citizens. We have built the whole ecosystem with having policies and standards that addresses all of the data challenges that comes around it. When we talk about the confidentiality of the data or data classification, or even in a broader sense, how to harness the value out of it. We've also looked into enabling a digital platform to exchange such data. As you said, there are different forms of data. It comes in big data, so you have to be ready for it. You have structured data, or you do have unstructured data where it comes on the wild, on the internet over here. And a lot of that can form policies within the city. So we moved into a stage where we are building an ecosystem. Around the ecosystem, this is where it was really important. Because yes, we all would like to get value out of data, but the thing is there are a lot of constituents that forms around it. And to have the right constituents with the right objectives on one table, this is, we call it an ecosystem enablement, where we bring everyone on one table, from the policymakers towards data governance, towards normal data scientists that is around it, in order to come and solve these city problems. And by doing that, we've looked into great opportunities into moving Dubai across maturity levels. And by doing that, Dubai becomes a test bed for United Arab Emirates. And now we are scaling what Dubai have achieved within its digital transformation around data, to be also a model that's unifying the exchange of information across United Arab Emirates. And this is where we can see a lot of opportunities can be unlocked, bringing all of the Emirates together around one city data platform. So the question is then how it's being used to harness or to build a policy making around it. Let me give an example of a recent collaboration between Smart Dubai and executive councils towards some of Dubai's KPIs into achieving less traffic accidents in the roads of Dubai. And this is where we came together with KPI, where it was under Dubai Vision in order to reduce number of fatality of accidents on the roads of Dubai. And we've looked at the data that's available from the traffic department and the city. We built a big dashboard around it, and by doing that, we came with a lot of insights on how the traffic can be reduced and what kind of programs that can be built around it in order to increase the awarenesses. And to be honest, it was very simple and very obvious what are the actions that the city can make in order to have, I would say, a process in order to reduce this number of traffics. And a lot of examples, Dubai is leading, and as I said, it's not only about addressing one type of data, it's any data that's available around yourself. There are a lot of data that have been accumulated in the past from the statistics, from the researches, and from reports, but we are looking more towards the future. And the future is to have a real-time data in our hand. Those real times is really building and forming the decisions. Our decision makers, their highnesses, our city leaders, they cannot afford to wait for reports that come and generated after 3 or 6 or 1 years. They want the information instantly. In instant data, these are the data that helps us form decision making, and this is our aim at Smart Dubai.
Excellent, thank you for that. Malik, I would like to turn to you so that you can perhaps share more on the UAE perspective on how you can leverage data for policy making. Perhaps you can highlight a challenge and opportunity for policymakers in the UAE using this data.
Thank you, Lara, for the question. I think the way I'm going to answer is that how do we actually, in FCSA, along with our government strategic partners, how do we run the SDG agenda, and how do we try to use, or do we actually understand the importance of data-driven policy or not, and what we have done proving that understanding. Of course, as His Excellency mentioned, we need to have an ecosystem there in order to come to a level where we are able to reach a place where we can use real-time data to do the relevant policy interventions that do not only address today's challenges, but even for the future. When FCSA was created, I'm not sure if this is public knowledge, FCSA was a merge between 2 federal entities, the National Bureau of Statistics and the Emirates Competitiveness Council. During that merge, the org structure has been designed in an innovative way to address this issue of data-driven policy using open data and big data. So FCSA is divided into two main sectors. The competitiveness sector, where we look at competitiveness indicators and where is the UAE located in comparison to the world. But looking at the statistics sector, it has been designed in a different way. So we have the basic statistical units, economic statistics, social, etc. But we do have a department called the Future of Data Department. From there, this has been established in 2015. From there, we're trying to work with all of our government peers, just like Smart Dubai in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and their equivalent in the other Emirates, where we are trying to create that ecosystem through that department. We try to create projects where we try to utilize big data or even open data and how we can make better policy making. I would actually invite you to visit the booth outside from FCSA. You'll be looking at different projects that this department has worked on. One of them is bayanat.ae. It is an example where we as a government, we have displayed there, along with our stakeholders, of course, more than 900 data sets that are available for the public or for the private sector to use and to basically create trend analysis or any type of data analytics that can help in basically creating better decisions, whether it will be for government or for the private sector.
Fantastic. So I encourage you all to go and explore that very exciting work that FCSA is doing. So to just take another perspective, Kai, I would like to ask you to highlight some positive examples on how data that has been made available by governments has driven policy analysis by NGOs.
Thank you for the question. Honored to be here. Have had a pleasure of listening to already some very, very exciting ideas and and experiences that I wish to take back from back to Estonia. But I think one of the things that I do think that are good to share about Estonia that can be useful for others as well is basically it comes from the size of Estonia. Estonia is a teeny tiny country with a population of 1.3 million, and because of that, we need to be very efficient. So efficiency is a key word in Estonia, and because of that, we're very E-friendly. So we're also called the E-Estonia, and we've created different policies and different situations and different access points to information so that the interaction between the government and the individuals would be as efficient as possible. So for example, for me, in order to come here, I had to renew my passport. It actually took me 20 minutes, and 20 minutes because I also had to take a photo of myself, so that was the longest I spent on that. Doing my taxes takes me 5 minutes. Creating an NGO takes me even less. I just need my identification card and my computer to do so. What we've been doing in Estonia is to try to make it as efficient for people and organizations and institutions as possible. So already yesterday we talked about bureaucracy and how as little bureaucracy as possible can be easier for NGOs and easier for the governments and easier for private organizations as well to actually focus on what is important, their work, and not to spend time on bureaucratic annoying things, to say the least. But I think one of the things that we've been doing wrong is we've taken data as it is. I think what needs to be done more efficiently is to analyze what the data meant. So for example, 2 years ago, Tartu, one of the second largest cities in Estonia, I think it's even smaller than the size of the festival city, but never mind. We created our public transportation system, and in order to do that, we analyzed the mobile data, people movement, and based on that, how the people move, we figured out how the buses need to go. So what routes, how often, what time, and etc. Turns out we were completely wrong because the people move that way currently because the existing bus routes are really bad. And they move like that only because they have to, and we just created more hassle for them. And it turned out that we just needed to ask people what kind of bus routes would you actually want, not necessarily take the data of where they go currently, but further analyze it. Put those two together, use the data where the people go, because using cars and taxi services, we get the information where do people actually want to go. But the people who already use buses do not necessarily reflect their wishes. So in order to get the sort of ideal situation, we need to put together the data and analyze it with different needs of the people. And for that, we need to ask. So including different stakeholders, including different opinions, and combining that information with data, I think is very important when it comes to policy making. So in Estonia, we've had this tremendous success with e-consultation systems where we make creating laws very efficient, but we can never, as already heard yesterday, we can't forget about including different stakeholders and opinions, because people do not necessarily express themselves through data. Data is very useful, but at the same time, we cannot forget about asking, because the individual thought and the individual action also matters.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And just to kind of continue on that idea of inclusiveness and leveraging data for real-life solutions to inefficiencies in our systems, I'd like to present my next question to Malik. What big data practices do you think can help accelerate inclusive and sustainable growth?
I think if we can take maybe just few seconds just to differentiate maybe big data and open data. Even us in FCSA, between ourselves, we have that confusion sometimes. Big data, I think, can be easily defined by size, I would say. So it is very large, rapidly changing data sets, I would say, while open data is basically you are putting data out there to be shared for, so it's defined by the use. If big data is defined by the large size, how very big complex it is and changing, open data is defined by the use, I think, where you can put it out there and you let the public or business, etc., to use it and to create the necessary analysis out there. So the bayanat.ae, which I mentioned, is an example of the open data. Some of the practices, I would maybe give few, or maybe one, a pilot project that was done with the Future of Data Department in FCSA. They were trying to basically answer a question. Today, do we have on the federal level, can we do something, can we actually use some of the big data that's available with some of the entities on the federal level and make a story out of it? So a project was with the TRA, Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, and Ittisalat and Du, sitting together with FCSA, trying to determine what is the human mobility between cities, between Abu Dhabi and Dubai and vice versa. Now, how it was technically done is not maybe what we want to talk about, but the answer is yes, there are, it's all about if people are willing to share the data. And you asked me in the previous question, the challenge. What challenge do we have when it comes to data-driven policy? I think people have to be convinced that data should be shared among each other for us to bring the better, or to bring a story to influence the decision maker in the right way, I would say. So yeah, that example worked, and I think that there are many actually happening as well in the pipeline, I would say.
That's brilliant. I hope to see more institutions trying to tell stories with the data to help us get really on board on how we can shape our societies using this valuable information. So thank you for that. Niles, I'd like to come over to you now and ask you to kind of build on what Malik has said, but on what are the practices or approaches to accelerating economic growth that can be implemented at the international level and kind of made more granular by national authorities, for example?
Thank you very much, and also thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. I'm very happy to participate in this discussion about data. I'm very passionate about data. Some have said that data is the new oil, and dealing with data and being a data scientist is the most sexiest occupation that you can have in the world. So doing that, I'm very happy to be here. I think that the SDGs and what is going on in countries around the world in relation to the use of data when you are going to make policies and take decisions is super important, and is something that will make the future a better place. Where I work at Statistics Denmark, we usually say that data beats words, and you should think about that. If you don't have any data to sustain what you're saying, you're just another guy with an opinion. You need data in order to find out if you're moving in the right direction, which is why there's a lot of initiatives all over the world to get more, better, and more granular data, just like Malik was talking about, more data sources and the data pool that His Excellency was talking about. That is a very good and very nice development. There are additions to that, I think. It's not only to create the data, you also need, as a statistical institution, to provide for people to be able to use the data. And there it might be a little bit complicated, so you need to be helpful in relation to that. so that people get the right data and get an easy access to the use of data. What we're doing in Statistics Denmark is that we are having a lot of data available online, and I would just like to support what Malik said. Go and look at the booth out there with the data that they're producing here. It's so nice to see because it's actually what is going on in statistical agencies worldwide, and statistical agencies are working together. It's a very nice environment to be in. People are sharing their knowledge. We have had visits from Dubai, and there's also been delegations from Denmark here to sharing the knowledge about what we are doing. Now, what we are doing in Denmark is that we are sharing a lot of data online. There's this organization called the Open Data Watch, and I'm so happy to say that in their ranking of countries worldwide, Denmark is in the latest ranking #1 in relation to giving open access to data. But we're not only giving access on the web, we are actually also giving researchers, analysts, government access to our microdata. We have a data center. You can go there. You can post for the data center your problem. They will make a customized data set for you, and you can online do your analysis on that data set so that they can support the policy making with the newest data available. If you want to find out what could be the influence of a specific political proposal, you can do a data analysis on that. On the global level, through the Global Working Group on Big Data for Official Statistics, we are working on setting up a global platform where statistical agencies worldwide can share their data, their experiences, their algorithms, share everything with each other, because we believe that the more people who are engaged in this and the more the sharing that is going on, the wiser we become working together, because this is a huge challenge and we cannot do it individually in each country. We have to do it together, and that's what is going on out there right now, and I'm very happy to be part of that.
Well, thank you for that. To summarize, I'd say the two main takeaways would be easy access to data and transparency. So, leading on to that, Your Excellency, would you like to add any comments?
I think I'll add to both of them. So if I would look at Dubai, Dubai is a dynamic city. It's very diverse. We have more than 200 nationalities. And also we are an economic hub. So a lot of challenges in order to address data, to make sure that all of this is very, very well providing the experiences that everyone is having here in Dubai. And we use the power of big data into that in order to see how does the city flow is going around and how is the crowd around the city. We work closely with telcos to bring mobility data, movements data across the city. But what was really interesting is to see how people are forming within the city across different times. Where do they really, what are the centers where we have the biggest dense of people around it? And also, we've looked at, for example, at events such as a New Year. So, New Year is one of the biggest events the city is hosting. A lot of visitors that's coming internationally and also across the country over here to certain districts in Dubai. Burj Khalifa is being one of them. Palm Jumeirah is another, and so on. So, and we started to compare how does the traffic looks like in the morning and also in the afternoon. And we used the power of artificial intelligence into detecting anomalies. You know, it's like, again, as a human, and no matter how many data scientists I could put around the table and data analysts, they can come up with good insights, few good insights. But we wanted in real time to understand the changes and the behaviors of people across the city. And an enormous number of findings that we've built, even with alerts, to say any changes happens, I would like to be alerted where people are moving, even if that is positive or negative. So sometimes you have good anomaly in terms of, for example, number of people are increasing along Burj Khalifa because at around 12 o'clock, this is where the celebration of the New Year would start. But on the other hand, there are some other districts where number of people have dropped. So what's going on? Is people safe over there? So all of those is, again, the power of how city can use the data again in for different fields. And as I said, it's like this is just for managing the city, for managing an event. And I'm sure every decision maker at his seat can use the power of big data with the proper dashboard, with the proper technologies around it to form decision in his sector. If we want to reach the SDGs goal, I'm sure a lot of insights can be generated from there. If you want to reach into optimizing the efficiency within the city, you can do that. If you want to enhance the roads, you can do that, and so on. So those are practices that I think not just to stop around making sure that we are revealing enough data, but it's more important also to lead some of those examples, again, around sophisticated areas such as big data and also crowd data where it have a lot of confidentiality, to address all of these challenges and reveal those information in the best appropriate way for our decision makers.
Thank you. It seems there's a common ground between the panelists that have spoken so far about mobility and leveraging data to be able to sustain the economic growth that we expect in the coming decades. So let's bear that in mind moving forward and when we come across new data and how we can leverage that to streamline our cities and our homes. So now moving on to the next issue, Niles, I'd like to pose this to you. What challenges and opportunities do you see for NSIs, or simply just share with us some insights from your work on the role they can play in advancing data access, for example?
It is a challenge to get the right data sources. We're working very much on that. I think that the SDGs, the fact that there are 169 targets and 242 indicators that we have to measure on, is emphasizing that we cannot rely on the way that we used to do things. The cross-cutting issue in relation to the SDGs about leaving no one behind calls for very granular data. You will not be able to sustain if you are leaving a specific entity, a specific group of people in society behind, if you don't have basically data on everybody in the society, which is hard to have if you are relying on survey data because it's very expensive and very difficult to get. In my own country, we've been doing social statistics based on data from admin sources for decades. We have the totality of the population in our databases. We know everybody about everybody, everything about everybody, and we can kind of combine those kind of informations. We can sustain that with big data sources. So there is a challenge in getting the right data sources. There's also, as I tried to mention before, a challenge in organizing the data so that they are available and usable for others, that those who are working with it professionally. And therefore, we do have also a challenge in relation to the capacity building among both the NSIs and also among the citizens in general. Actually, I would take just a few seconds to do a promotion. Here is a big data strategy of Statistics Denmark. I put it outside, and I was happy when I came back after the first session. There was only one copy left. You will be able to find it in English on our webpage. It is addressing, in a very, I think, simple way, a number of challenges that NSIs have to deal with in order to be able to capture the use of big data for official statistics.
I mean, I can definitely understand the importance of this data. SDSN produces the Global SDG Index and Dashboards report, and we are constantly coming up against the need to fill data gaps worldwide so that we can really tailor accurate policies to achieve the agenda. So, Malik, I'd like to turn to you to share some takeaways from FCSA's experience on how it manages SDG portfolios and better use of data.
Thank you for the question, Lara. Managing SDGs, so the number one thing we did, let's say, once the cabinet has approved FCSA to handle the portfolio, a national committee on SDG was formed. So basically creating the team where those will be communicating data to each other, okay, so that we'll be reporting the progress of the UAE in the right manner. Plus, this group will be the one driving policies. But it was not enough only to create a national committee that's only from 17 members of the federal government. we had to expand as well, horizontally and vertically, and I'll explain. Horizontally, I've mentioned this as well in a panel yesterday. We have also included the private sector to be part of the committee. So a private sector advisory council has been created to advise the committee and to report on what they are actually doing when it comes to SDG, what initiatives are they doing, and to advise government on what could be done. Currently now, we are also forming a youth council on SDGs as well. We want the youth to be a part of this effort, a voice to be heard, and to advise government on how to achieve the SDGs. Few weeks back, when we opened actually the applications, we received more than 600 applications. It's been filtered through stages to 400 and then 100. Now we'll have 10 to 12 members that will be working for 2 years to advise the government. So that's a horizontal expansion, creating the team in the UAE to work on this very important portfolio. Vertically, I'll give an example of the Ministry of Health and Prevention. What they started doing is that they have mapped their mandate with the indicators or the targets. As you know, there are 17 goals split into 169 targets, split into 232 indicators. They have mapped the number of indicators relevant to the Ministry of Health, and they try to find the framework to include it into the machinery of the ministry, meaning inserting those targets or indicators into their KPI system in order for them to move the ministry and for the ministry to work with its peers, whether it's the Dubai Health Authority in Dubai, equivalent in Abu Dhabi and in the other Emirates, for them to create policies or initiatives that will help. One initiative, for example, which was approved by Cabinet, hopefully we'll see it live by 2022, is the NUMER, the National Unified Medical Record. So the idea there is basically for every patient in the UAE to have one medical file that can be accessed by public and private sector practitioners in health. You can then imagine having that information being updated. You'll be able to spot, I think, trends, etc., when it comes to diseases, and then prevention can happen in the right manner. One thing I'd like to add as well, but that's a product by FCSA, where we have partnered with the company, the private sector, ESRI, to create our GIS portal. Now that, if we go to the health example as well, if you can combine statistical data or data, let's say, with geospatial technology, if we go to health, a scenario that maybe we can imagine is you'll be able to group certain diseases or cluster them related to a certain geographical location. So then you'll be able to service that location depending on the diseases that are happening there. You can service them in the right way when it comes to healthcare services.
So very exciting innovations on the horizon in health services as well, if we are able to leverage big data for that purpose. Kai, I'd like to turn to you now and ask you to share with me your perspective as an NGO and as someone from Estonia on the data gaps you identify and how you imagine we can fill those in the future so that we can truly measure progress for sustainable development.
Thank you for that question. One thing that we've been sort of overseeing or recording in the civil society sector as a global trend as well is the sort of reduction of this paradigm where we focus on these sectors. So we've been talking for tomorrow and today, for yesterday and today as well. We've been hearing quite a lot about a role of the businesses, the role of the governments, the role of the NGOs, and in the morning, the role of the universities, from Lara yourself. But one thing that I think we need to work more is how to intertwine these and how to see, first of all, the role of individuals and the sort of ways to actually harness the capacity that these sectors and organizations obtain in a more broader way. So for example, one of the success stories Estonia has is the e-residency. With limited human resources, as I already pointed out, we are in desperate need of taxpayers, because in Estonian statistics, I will not be receiving national pensions because I don't have anyone working in Estonia to provide me with that by the time I need it. So for us, people who do not like immigrants very well, I don't know why. For us, we need taxpayer money, and we created e-residency for that. That was a program that was carried out by an entrepreneur who wanted to do something, went to work in a ministry for 2 years, created the project, created the system, and then left. So it's not necessarily the role of the government or that specific ministry, or it's not the role of that private entity. It's that individual who has an idea, wants to do something, and the system allowing that to happen. So for us to create flexibility for people to move from one area to the other, for example, for some ideas, for some initiatives, civil society sector is the best way to carry things out. So for example, Citizen Initiative Portal was carried out by a third sector organization, a citizen initiative, because people actually felt that their voice is not heard. We want to be heard, we want the government, the ministries to listen to our ideas and our wishes, and when we made it happen. So Citizen Initiative Portal allows us to create initiatives that we send to the parliament. We collect digital signatures under there. We only need 1,000 of them. And then we send it to the parliament, and the parliament will take it into analysis, and then, if successful, they do change the laws based on those. So far, we've been having this system for, I think, 4 years now. We've had all of the initiatives that have had the necessary 1,000 signatures have been integrated into changes into the legal system. So what we need to see is there are structures and systems that civil society sector allows you to create change, but there are ways for the public sector and the private sector to create change as well. But the important thing I would like to emphasize is that we do not limit them. We do not grant sort of barriers there, but we grant access. We make it available for an individual who wants to create change to be able to have that access to that organization, institute that they see could best serve that change.
Fantastic. Thank you for that intervention, Kai. I believe you had a comment you would like to share, Niles.
Yeah, thank you. I was just reminded, listening to what Carrie and Malik was saying, that partnership is very much key to what we're doing here. I guess it's said that no man is an island, and I think the SDGs have to make sure that no organization is an island. We need to work together in order to achieve what we want to achieve with the SDGs. And just want to take a minute to share with you the experience that we had in Denmark. Now, in March 2016, I was sitting at the ambassador's office at the UN delegation for Denmark in the UN in preparation for the yearly meeting in the Statistical Commission. And he told us that now we knew that there's been these SDGs, and they were broken into those 169 targets and 242 indicators, and we have to measure on that, and I think the man is crazy. How are we ever going to do that? And then we went back to Denmark, and we got a lot of new friends. The first friends we got was from the private sector. The private sector takes the SDGs very seriously for business purposes, which is totally legitimate. If they can have products and way of producing them that are actually in accordance with the SDGs, they are in the upper hand in relation to the market that they are in. Then we started to eventually talk to politicians, to NGOs, to academia. And then we created what we called a data partnerships at Statistics Denmark. And to our big surprise, it was a huge success. Now, Data is sometimes seen as boring people dealing with boring data, but we actually invited people to come and to discuss with us how we should cover the data things in relation to the SDGs for Denmark. And they came in huge numbers from NGOs, from private sector, from parliamentarians, national, local politicians, academia, you name it, and they were there. We have gathered them a number of times, proposed to them how we should measure in the Danish context how Denmark was doing in relation to the SDGs. They have given us feedback, and we have kind of adjusted what we've been doing in relation to that. And last year, we then launched our SDG data platform, where you can go visit also at the webpage of Statistics Denmark to see how Denmark is doing. Now, this year, we are working together with the private sector, so we want to make an addition to the national showing how Danish private companies are actually making a difference. And we already started the conversation with the NGOs in Denmark, because next year we want to make another addition. So we have like the national thing, the thing about the private sector for Denmark, the thing about the NGOs for Denmark, and eventually also for the municipalities. The nice thing about being an NSI in relation to SDGs is that everybody likes you, because you may be one of the few organizations in your country who have to take every SDG serious. There are different parts that take different parts of the SDG serious. We have to work with all of them, which is why I think it worked for us to invite everybody to do that together with us.
Brilliant. I hope we see that level of cooperation moving forward in all countries, not just Denmark and the UAE, of course, and Estonia. I'd like to turn to you now, Kai, we've already heard some examples of how data can be used to streamline the lives of its citizens and prepare us for the sustainable growth of our future. But can you just share maybe one example or two about how you've seen governments use data to streamline interactions between them and their citizens?
I think one very, very important thing that we've been talking about here, access to data, is one opportunity. We've heard from Denmark how you've managed to create a system that you can actually sort of invite or ask for information and you're provided. I think this is something that we do need to, considering we're this post-truth environment or world, we do need this access to information, and we need this access to data to be more convenient. But it needs to be vice versa as well. We need to have the communication between the government, different ministries, different public institutions, and the people as individuals to be more efficient and to be as little time-consuming as possible and to be as sort of convenient as possible. So, for example, in Estonia, we have, I already briefly mentioned it, this e-consultation system. It was originally created to sending documents from one ministry and one government institution or public institution to the other. The same applies to municipalities. So government institutions interacting with each other, but it turned out that it's actually a very good way to actually include people's opinion as well. So what we've been doing now is to sort of develop further on this platform so that we not only have government institutions sharing their thoughts and documents with each other, but actually people being able to comment on drafts of legislation, both in municipalities and on the government level in parliament, and drafting their own legislations as well. So I, as a citizen, can just go online. For example, there's a new environmental discussion going on in Estonia that forest is one of our most important, most valued natural resource. And even since the beginning of 17th century, for some reasons, Estonians think that the forests are running out. And they haven't so far. They've been growing, actually. But that's why we need statistics as well and data to, have the true information and have the real overview of what is currently going on. But for us to actually create this legislation so that it wouldn't create an enormous fuss or fight even between two opinions, two sides, the environmentalists and the economists who actually want to use that natural resource. For us, having those two sides in a room creates very much tension. We tried that during summertime. It almost got violent, which is very rare for Estonians because we're very, very peaceful and phlegmatic, you might even say. But for us to actually do that online, for us to, for a local municipality to create a draft for a legislator, creates it so much easier to actually include different perspectives, different opinions, and different sides into the same legislation by just inviting them to comment on those platforms about those drafts and those legislations. What we've been seeing in Estonia is that different stakeholder consultations have been very time-consuming. But I think this is where this sort of global experience can be very useful. When we look how legislation is drafted in, for example, Japan or South Korea, the original time invested into planning and consultations by different stakeholders takes quite a lot of time. But when you actually get the legislation done, the satisfaction is quite high. When we take, for example, US, where Estonia is more similar to, the original time invested into creating the legislation is much, much smaller, but also the satisfaction with the law when it's done and taken into action is much lower as well. So in order for us to actually get laws and get policies and get systems that people are happy with or can abide by, that means that we need to have this interaction between the individuals, between different institutions and organizations as convenient as possible. And for that, I think this is where the government needs to step up. The government needs to create this system where the stakeholder consultations can be as convenient as possible and different opinions of different target groups can be included. Because that, first of all, it creates more efficiency in time-wise, and it creates better legislation overall, because the quality is what matters at the end.
What a fascinating thought. Stakeholder engagement 2.0, where we leverage online platforms to get opinions and meaningful engagement from all stakeholders in this process. Thank you for that, Kai. Your Excellency, we've heard already one example from you about how Smart Dubai leverages data to better understand people's movements around big events, for example. Is there another example you can share with the audience and the panel about how we can streamline interactions and the way governments interact with their citizens here?
There is no. Just joking.
Okay, next.
Just building on my colleague from Estonia about their initiatives into citizens' engagement and providing public opinion. I think there have been an attempt in the Emirate of Dubai. Again, you know, it's like in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, we would like to be the happiest nations. And we want Dubai to become the happiest city on earth. So I think that is one of our goals that we want to achieve. But then the question is, how do you sense that and how do you engage people in order to understand the level of satisfaction, their opinion, and their happiness level on the services the government is providing? So we've tried the same, but on the government services, and especially the ones which is being provided on electronic channels or on mobile apps or on digitals or even on the service centers. Over there, we have launched a happiness meter. It's a very simple tool that people can use and provide their opinion if they are happy, unhappy, or if they are neutral. Then it goes into the next phase if the citizen would like to provide more information about his vote. Then it goes into sets of questions. All of those information that have been, or all of this data that have been collected in the past 3 years, we have now almost about 8 million votes on the government services. All of those votes have been used today to understand how government is performing. Second is also how people are satisfied about government services and where are areas of improvements. And this is where it comes down to. So yes, first you collect a lot of data, but how you are acting on those data. So those government departments, we've provided them with these data, with its insights, and then they started to analyze. They said, okay, for Dubai Water and Electricity Authority, they said, okay, now we understand people have preference towards, for example, whenever they are moving from a house to another, they want to do the termination of their contract electronically. And they went immediately and provided that service, and they saw their rank from having 80% level of happiness, it's increased to 91. So that was a big jump from where they were to where they became. And again, this is how the power of engaging the public, the citizens, and collecting data from that and start forming decisions on how to improve government services. So it was really a great example. We are looking into how to widen up the scope of happiness meter across the Emirate of Dubai to gauge people's happiness.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Governments are there to serve their citizens, so what better approach than asking them to democratically engage in shaping how these policies are going to be moving forward. I'd like to turn to you, Niles. Any advice on best practices that can be adopted to enhance the impact of these interactions? Oh, just, I'm basically just asking if you can identify any best practices that can advance interactions between governments and citizens that you have learned from your work at the international level, and in Denmark, if you so choose.
I think it's important, as was said already in the outset, to kind of be out there and tell the story so that people can see the usage and the advantages of having data. Being in a data environment on a daily basis, you can be very excited about just working with the data, but you can't expect other people to have that. So you need to make it visible for them, how they can actually benefit from the use of data. We have had a communication strategy at Statistics Denmark for a long time where we are actually trying to tell stories. We're trying to be extremely active on the social media. We have, I think, huge success on putting like targeted stories on Twitter and Facebook, and we can see with the measurement we have that actually encourage more citizens to interact also with the more like heavy stuff we have online. So I think you need to find a number of selling points in relation to the use of data. That goes for the average ordinary citizens. Now, as I was saying before, the journey that we have been on in relation to the data partnership and the SDGs, I think has taught us a lot about what is the need from specific organizations, from private enterprises, from NGOs, from municipalities, but I'm also sure that it's taught them a lot about what you can actually do with data. You basically need to interact with people. You cannot like sit there in your office and expect people to show up. You need to be active as part of the community that you are engaging in.
Absolutely. Data is far beyond just numbers, and they do tell a story that can be very revealing and very useful to help us really kind of target our approaches to our most pressing challenges of today. I'd like to take a moment to invite, perhaps Malik, do you have any comments you'd like to share before I open the session to questions from the audience?
I was just thinking while my colleagues were speaking here in the panel, I think the key thing is collaboration. I know I've been saying it a lot of times, but it has a lot of power to make change. If you have the right people collaborating, and when I say people, I do mean it, because even when I've worked for years in the competitiveness agenda to work how to create positive reform in the UAE, and for it to result in a positive change in ranking, it needed people, not systems. In the ideal world, I think you would want a system to communicate to another, a ministry communicating to another, requesting data or things to be done, and you expect it to happen. But no, if people are not convinced to work together, it will not happen. So when it comes to, I think one of the main challenges we have is sharing data, or for people to trust each other to share the data. People who are collecting the data, they do believe in the benefit of having that data collected to be processed in a way and to have the best policy making or intervention happening. But the people that you collect from should have the same belief as well. I think this is maybe what I would want to say, and this is the key, I think, for making change happen.
Thank you. I don't think you can emphasize enough the need for collaboration in this agenda. So if it's mentioned in every intervention, I think that's perfectly fine. So I'd like to take this opportunity to open up to the floor and get some questions. So I'm just looking around for, yes, the gentleman in the third row. Sorry, I apologize. Can you please introduce yourself and let us know who you are directing your question to?
Abed Baides of Identity Branding Forum. Data is an asset that is very, very difficult times due to disruptive technologies affecting data collection. The biggest problems manufacturers facing today is lack of data of their markets, human insights and wisdoms. That is today in the hands and the smartphones and in applications of the companies like your Uber, Careem, or Amazons who control those data. They have immediate access to human insights and wisdoms at home. What efforts has been made at governments levels or at businesses levels that could become available to stakeholders in the industries to get them access to that human insights and wisdoms of people at home? That is more of in control today in your Uber, Careem, or Amazon-like disruptive technologies that took control of data. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more question before I invite the panel to react.
This is Saleh Abu Ali of Dubai Economic Development Department. I'm an HR expert, and my core focus and the bottom line in my career is the human factor. And my question is addressed to Niels in Denmark. With my due love to Danish dairy from infanthood to manhood, I would like to raise this question to you. You did mention capacity building in relation to data analytics vis-a-vis open data and big data. Can you elaborate and putting this within context? Thanks a lot.
Great, so we still have time, and I'll come back to the audience again for some questions, but let's hear from the panelists now their reactions. So now let's start with you on the last question.
Yeah. What we have been doing in relation to capacity building is that we have engaged much more with academia, with the centers at universities, not only in Denmark, but also at the European level, that are putting up training courses for statisticians, but also for others in order to get the competences that are needed. Denmark is a small country, and we cannot do it on our own. We are part of the European statistical system, and at the European level, there's a lot of training activities going on where the staff of Statistics Denmark, together with staff from other statistical agencies in Europe, can get the competences taught by the people with the best knowledge at the European level. If I may, I would like to say a little bit about the first question too.
Please.
Yeah. The Global Working Group on Big Data for Official Statistics, which is a UN entity, and I'm co-sharing it together with my colleague from UK, have been in contact with Google, with Amazon, and with Microsoft in relation to find out how we can get access to some of the data and some of the technology they have for the common good. I mean, it's for me totally okay that they're using it for business, no problem with that. But there's also a potential use for the common good. I think so far the discussion has been quite good, but we are now, as I said previously, trying to set up a global platform which is actually a global cloud run by the statistical agencies so that we are in charge of what is going on in that data repertoire that is going to be created. But we are getting help from Amazon, from Google, and from Microsoft in relation to the software that we're using, and eventually maybe also getting access to some of the data. We have a project with Google on some of their Earth observation data to use that also for official statistics. And we have been talking with Nielsen, this big global company on scanner data and price data. So we are trying to get the best that we can from the private sector to put it on a global platform so that it can be used for the common good for statistical production. That's what we are trying to do.
Karp, I see you nodding your head there. Do you have something you'd like to add on that?
I think it boils down to the same keyword, cooperation and collaboration. Both of those, the human factor and the big companies as well, because they inherently boil down to the same keyword. I think in the case of Estonia, when we look at our own sort of Estonia-based or Estonia-originated now global companies, Taxify, TransferWise, Skype, now under Microsoft, then the cooperation between the government and those entities has always been inherently very, very important. And luckily it's not, it hasn't been one-sided. It hasn't been that the government has been sort of knocking on the doors or of those private entities, but it's also that these entities themselves, these organizations and corporations, do have a share of social responsibility, and they do understand it, because having social responsibility, having this sort of mission-driven idea behind it is also what gets them further in the market and further in jobs as well, because people actually nowadays, the X, Y, Z generation, whatever they're called, they do want to work in companies that have this sort of mission as well, not only to earn money for someone else. And another thing with human factor, I think, not necessarily only the people who create the visualization of information and data and their capacity building is important, but I think sort of linking it back to the previous panel, I think what is important with capacity building is education in the broadest term as well. Us people, individuals, being able to understand data, being able to read those visualized information sheets is very important. And keeping in mind that we live in a world where the president of one of the biggest countries in the world still does not believe in climate change, then I think capacity building in reading data is enormously important.
Thank you, Kai.
I'd like to elaborate on both questions, even though the first one was only addressed to Nils.
No, that's perfectly fine. Please do.
In collaboration with the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government, since the launch of Dubai Data Initiative, we've worked with them closely to offer sets of master classes and also training courses to the government officials in order to educate them in the importance of data, and also more importantly to help them guide the implementation of data strategy, data policies and regulations into their organization to be more empowered, to be data-driven. We have more than 300 students who have graduated from those programs, and now they are also within the government of Dubai. Second have been also a cooperation between Smart Dubai and Rochester Institute of Technology to offer a master degree in data science, a first of its kind. This is when we are going into more advanced level of generating data insights and utilizing data to tell a better story or form a decision. A lot of efforts that we've put in over there also to, again, to drive building the capacity in United Arab Emirates. So this is on the capacity building level. On the engagement with the private sectors to reveal more data insights about citizens and humans here in the country. Last year, we have done a lot of work with the private sector. It was a collaborative approach towards setting a strategy on how this exchange of data can happen between public and private sector into one city platform to help citizens to understand what's happening around themselves, but also for all of those private companies who are hungry for information. But we said, instead of the government to go and set what is the ambition, let's work together with them so that we understand better the need that is there and from the private sector. This year, there would be a launch for that private sector strategy. It would enhance our regulation system. We will continue building the ecosystem around ourselves by including the private sector to be part of the exchange of information on one city platform. A third, we are going into use case approach. Again, you can easily get in a trap with data to spread yourself very thin into this domain, because everything contains data. Data is available everywhere, and it's coming in different formats. And I think that is not the mission. The mission is to make sure that we create those values. So for that, we've identified use cases that the sector have seen is very strong, and they are in desperate need of that type of data to work collaboratively to make them available second quarter of this year, inshallah.
Inshallah. So I think we have a little bit of time for perhaps 2 more questions. I'd like to call on the lady in the back, please. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Noura Khouri, and my question goes for His Excellency mainly because it has to do with Dubai. Touching up on this gauging of happiness with the ministries and everything like that, I think you can collect a lot of data, but is it the actual correct data? I've been through that. I've used these apps where you know, the smiley faces and all of that, but is it at the right level? So for example, a lot of services are now online, and yes, I'm happy with, for example, dealing with the online interface, but then after I'm done and I click the smiley face, I find out that, for example, it hasn't worked, or I have to end up doing some more, and ultimately I'm unhappy. But in your system, I am a happy customer. So have you actually collected the data at the right point? And does it actually reflect my whole experience? The other thing is to do with the data collection during, for example, New Year's or anything like that. So yes, you've collected the data where you know where people congregate, where people end up going, but I think with Dubai you have an issue of so many different cultures and visitors and residents. There's so many different types of people in the city, so I understand that it's very difficult to collect data that reflects the actual, not just residents, but different cultures. So for example, a lot of people that I know on New Year's or whatever, they would prefer to stay at home, or they would prefer to leave the city. And that is a huge amount of resources for the city as well that gets kind of trapped and left behind. So do you have a way to collect data to tell you, for example, if I live out somewhere where it's very inconvenient for me to come to the Burj Khalifa area, you could use that data to formulate something for that region or that culture, and thereby gain something out of that for the city. I don't know if you have a way to collect that. Thank you.
Since there were 2 questions packed in there, I will let you answer, and then we'll move on to the gentleman in the front, who's been very patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Noura. They are very important questions, and I think the first was more about, does the data that has been collected from happiness meter can tell and can form enough decision about how services can be enhanced. Let me give you a bit of history. Yes, from the beginning we had a bit of doubt to understand, is there any bias into that data, and are we getting enough information from happiness meter? And when we compared the data that have been collected from happiness meter as a vote versus the surveys that has been done on the same services, the difference between the happiness meter and survey data was only 2%. So this tells how accurate this information is and how safe is it to form decisions based on it. So this is one, and the quality of the data that's available. Of course, the more data you collect, the better you can understand the behaviors that's happening, and this is why we've enhanced happiness meter from version 1.0 to 2.0 to collect more data from the citizens. When it comes to crowd data, and again, you are highlighting some of the deep issues that might come from data. And this is why we started actually 2019 by launching our principles and guidelines and of ethical use of artificial intelligence. And if you ask why that is, with artificial intelligence, I would say, again, we want to make sure artificial intelligence is using a lot of our data. And as I said, our crowd management is using data. We would like to make sure that it has ethical use of the data, and it's all inclusive. For example, when we are collecting a citizen's data, yes, we have 200 nationalities. If I only fed it data about only locals who are living in the Emirate of Dubai, I cannot form a decision from the rest of the city. So these are the guidelines and principles that we are using to make sure that we are addressing the challenges that you have raised over here. And I would say it is a journey. So we just started from some point, which is really good. But what is really important is where do we want to reach with it. Data has been accumulated in this city for the past 30 or 40 years. It was really booming with the digitization that have happened in the past 2 decades. And what's important is there are more data that to come from the future. So how we get the understandings that we have from the past, from the data that we are collecting today, to enrich this journey, to understand some of our challenges. And as my colleague Malik have said, we need to have a collaboration. So we need to collaborate with different constituents from the city when we are building such a tool, to bring people from roads and transport authorities, to bring people from culture, to bring people from police and security, to understand, okay, how data is being segmented, and how to bring all of the thoughts into one place in order to ensure that we are inclusive in the way that we are addressing the crowd within the city of Dubai.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'd like to address the gentleman in the front row, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Victor Pineda. I'm a professor of urban planning at the University of California at Berkeley. And one of the things that we had not talked about is the data deserts, which are portions of the population that aren't generating data, aren't creating insights to the public policy decisions on a global scale. We have large portions of the population, whether they're migrants, whether they're older persons, which are also people with disabilities. So if we're going to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind, and if we are going to think about the future and the role that artificial intelligence will play, how do we ensure that we are proactively engaging with the populations that have the most to benefit, but also are most at risk by not being adequately reflected in these data samples and data that's being collected. So, for example, people with disabilities and their interests or their preferences in accessing public services, moving around the city, so that we can get a better picture and that we can see things that we usually can't see. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before inviting the panelists to respond, I'd just like to ask for one last question from the gentleman here in the front.
Assalamu alaikum. It's not a question, it's more of a comment. First of all, I would like to thank our panelists for this illuminating session. Just want to add on what my colleagues here, His Excellency Mr. Yunus and Malik have talked about some of the initiatives in the UAE. Sorry, first of all, I have to introduce myself. I haven't introduced myself. My name is Saeed Al-Bahri. I'm an advisor to some of the government departments, and also I'm a chairman of a company called Smart World, system integrator company, local system integrator company in Dubai. I would like just to add about some of the things that what the government is doing here in terms of the engagement with the citizens, for especially on the data. And actually, since we're talking about this data, big data and all this, we are on a verge now to convene the UAE Data Hackathon, I think, which is coming maybe next week. And by far, it's the largest hackathon in the UAE, which is a federal initiative across all of the UAE, to engage with the students and the public and the civic center at large to look at the Bayanati portal, which under the federal government, and to see what they come up in terms of applications and the usage. The first round was held in 2018. It was really very successful. There was a lot of engagement that we saw from the public and even from the Forest Emirates, which is Al Fujairah. And actually the winner who happened to come from Al Fujairah, they come up with a new solution for the venom against snakes bites, and which happens to be a problem in such area in Al Fujairah in the mountain. And just one very interesting observation that most of the participants, more than 65% of the participants in the UAE hackathon last year was female. I think this is probably a good thing to speak about. So this is one of the initiatives actually which the UAE is really sponsoring, and we found that the public at large is really very engaging when it comes to the use of the data that is available, and hope that to see Bayanat portal grows up in terms of the data sets and what comes next. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment. Very insightful, and we appreciate hearing your example. So, to address the last question of the panel before I summarize some of our remarks, how can we address data deserts and artificial intelligence to ensure that no one is left behind in the success of this agenda? Yes, and I would like to invite you all to perhaps, is anyone burning to answer this question? Well, we'll start, we haven't heard from you in a while, Niels, and then we'll move on to you, Your Excellency. And if we can keep it brief, perhaps everybody can manage to say something very quick on this matter.
Well, the very short answer to the question is that I don't know. And the longer answer is that because I don't know, I engage in conversation with people who might know of how we can do it. So what we're doing in my country is that we're engaging in a conversation with the umbrella organization of disability organizations in Denmark to talk to them about how we can make better coverage of that part of the population, including the issues that are important for them. And we are making slowly progress. And we're engaging with the Danish refugee organization to talk to them about how we can do better migrant statistics. And in that conversation, we're also talking about how we can make use of new data sources. What we call big data, all the sensors that people have, all the Earth observation we have in relation to migration and all these kind of things. So that's things that we are working on. And I think the good thing is that, as I said early on, the SDGs and the issue about leaving no one behind has put this issue on the map. So we are now talking about it in a much more productive way than we used to be. At least that's a positive thing. Thank you.
Positive indeed. Kai.
I'll take it from here. We've had some examples where I can say that I'm quite proud of Estonia. One of them is participatory budgeting, where one of the first votes on participatory budgeting, the main change that was created in one of the municipalities was focusing on people with disability and their easing their movement in that community. And I think that was the reason why it was successful, was the same approach. No one can be left behind. But that actually means that people need to make themselves heard. People with disabilities have to connect with their NGOs, their organizations that actually speak for them, the organizations that advocate for them. You need community. Whatever kind of minority or even majority you are, whatever kind of idea you have or advocacy plan you have, you need a community to actually get stuff done. You alone are probably going to be left behind, regardless the fact that you're a minority or not, or a person with a disability or not. The same with migrants. I think one issue that I already referenced is that Estonians are afraid of migrants. I don't know why. We have very few of them, but it's terrifying for us. So we've been collecting and analyzing data about migrants in Europe, and luckily they're very, very active mobile data users, and that information is accessible. So for example, we're now creating our integration policy for the migrants that maybe one day will come to Estonia. We never know that they will, but we're at least creating the policy based upon their mobile data usage now. So we're creating, for example, information. We analyze where migrants take information, what kind of apps they use, what kind of social media platforms they use, what kind of sites they visit, and based on that information, we sort of target our own information to that area as well. So we are working on it. It is a work in progress. I agree with Niels on this, but there are steps, and I think these steps, how we actually include minorities, has been more efficient than some of the ordinary people or majority people targeted policy making, because that's something that people are now focusing more heavily on.
I'd like to answer this question a bit differently. Again, looking towards the future, there would be more digitization and there would be more data available. This means more services available through technologies such as artificial intelligence and so on. So the way that we are making sure that no one is left behind in the new implementations and new technology is through our ethical use of data and digital solutions. And for that, we have provided a toolkit that is available on our portals. If you visit smartdubai.ae, go to Artificial Intelligence Toolkit. Over there, organization can use that toolkit to assess how ethical is their digital implementation on technology. And by that, they get at the end of that, as a result, a scoring. That scoring can tell how they score on the ethical use. And when I talk about ethical, fairness is part of it, and also inclusive is part of it. So by that, they can understand where they are lacking behind and how to improve their implementations and address some of those challenges.
If I may add very briefly, I think Dr. Victor has been trying to meet since yesterday, but I'll make sure I meet you now after the panel to discuss specifically, you've mentioned a group, people with disability. We call them here people with determination. So basically, I'm not going to be talking about tools, etc., but normally, let's say if I'm driven by either the National Agenda Framework or the SG framework, based on that drive, we would be then doing certain steps, collecting data relevant to the agenda, etc. But you cannot ignore people with determination. Normally, how would this be taken forward? Now, I've been inspired by that conversation. I would normally speak to the committee member in NC from the Ministry of Community Development to address if there are data gaps that is preventing the ministry from taking the right policy making, addressing that group. If the answer is yes, and then we'll go and work together. But I think I will actually, as we said, handling SDGs, the more you expand, you include more people you talk to, you derive to better conclusions. My immediate action will be to sit with a representative from academia to actually see how would he see is the best way to address the concerns related to people with the determination, and maybe what tools we can apply to make action and to make sure we don't leave anyone behind.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished panelists. I'd like to just summarize very briefly in the interest of time, because we have been swept away with scintillating discussion. But it seems that cooperation is indeed going to be a key ingredient moving forward for sustainable and inclusive growth. That we need to have democratic processes for how we choose to use that data, filling gaps, and making sure that we leverage data to address very pressing needs of society. And to make our lives just simply a bit easier, and to make these goals just a little bit more achievable and clear. And that we can leverage storytelling around data to help enhance engagement from the public. There's also an important role for private actors to play in sharing information so that we can tailor policies that help shape inclusive societies that are efficient and streamlined. And then to really just put it in one line, cooperation, cooperation, capacity building, transparency, accessibility, cooperation. And so I hope that you will go out there today and discuss and examine the data that's available in your local and regional context to see where there might be gaps and how you in your work and in your communities can help facilitate filling those gaps moving forward. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Lara, and thank you to the panelists. We will now have another one of our very brief Forum Sparks talks. This is just going to take 15 minutes, and we'll be hearing from a non-resident fellow at the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government. So please do stay in your seats. Then we will be breaking for lunch.